太平洋、印度洋、大西洋、北冰洋、欧洲、亚洲、非洲、美洲、大洋洲、东亚、南亚、西亚、东南亚。
So this week we talked to Julien Gaudfroy, who's a TV and radio personality in China, but more importantly, he's reached native level in Chinese, even in his bio on Twitter. In this podcast, we talk about how he learned Chinese, his theories on native level and language learning, as well as personal stories shocking natives in China.
And as always, guys, you know what needs to be shocked? The like button. So go destroy that right now. And of course, follow us both on Twitter, and hope you guys enjoy the episode.
All right, so Julien, can you give us a quick background of who you are and where you're at today?
I've been a TV host in China in Chinese language. So a lot of people know me through that as a, let's say, media personality, because it now involves everything, right? Most people are hosts anyway because of social media. Anyone is a host, and I have to say that in our times, a lot of self-made hosts who just do their own videos are actually better hosts than most of the professional hosts in my view. But anyway, so I've been a professional TV host and radio host for all those years, and now also do my own video channels like everybody. Only started last year because I was quite late to this whole new phenomenon. Otherwise, I used to be a classical cellist. I used to be a professional classical cellist, and actually getting out of school in a Paris conservatory, the CNSM DP, for those who know, which is basically the best classical music school in France. Yeah, getting out of school, I started to work a little bit, and right away I had some bad injuries. I had an old injury that started to get worse, and it got complicated, so I couldn't play for a while. That was in the 1990s. That was in 1998. I started learning Chinese. Yeah, my whole 缘分, my whole destiny or story with China started like that. Just things sometimes it's just by luck or by lack of luck, but it turned out, of course, to be a good thing, and it made who I am now. And I've been an entrepreneur too. I also had a French restaurant, a French bistro that we opened in Beijing next to close to the embassies, the good neighborhood. I had a French bistro there for 2 years. That was one of the things I did too. I used to have a coffee shop too, so I'm trying to be eclectic. I have a lot of passions, so I don't think I'm good at being an entrepreneur for the sake of, making money or being an entrepreneur, but I like to do what I like. So I'm trying, sometimes I have a passion, and I spend my whole day thinking about it, trying to find solutions. I do filter coffee, V60. I have my hand grinder. I do that also every day. So I'm a coffee aficionado too. So I think that's a good start.
When I first saw you on the internet, I was super blown away. There's like a video of you speaking Chinese. I think the title is maybe like French guy speaks perfect like native Chinese or something.
Was it 锵锵三人行 or
it might have been. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's one of the.
Yeah, I was like super blown away because you're actually speaking like fully native level Chinese, which is pretty rare.
说一句实话，她比芙蓉姐姐长得好看多了，这个法国人的审美观。
Starting with that, like, can you talk about what your approach to was with learning Chinese in the beginning?
Yeah, so originally I started for fun, and I think a lot of people talk. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little later, but a lot of people talk about how being gifted is very important for languages, and I always say it's not that important. I wouldn't say it doesn't influence the result, but it does not really decide whether you'll be able to speak and write fluently or not, or read at least. Writing, I mean, I never wrote even proper French alphabet letters, so that's some people just can't write properly. I guess. But no, I would say that for me originally, because I started to learn for fun, I was definitely gifted. I'll acknowledge that. And being maybe a musician, but even among musicians, I have quite good ears, I think. So it was a game for me. I actually believe that the fact of being a musician helps me more in another aspect, which is I think also valid for a lot of athletes, like high level athletes, when you're a top level athlete, because you are used to solving impossible solutions. You are used to having to achieve results that most humans cannot achieve. So you have been grinding for years in order to achieve that, because people around you do. People around you can do it and younger than you, and you're like, what? Why? And some, you saw them grow up and you're like, hey, he or she was not as talented as me originally, but somehow, why is he able to do that and not me? So you have to solve those problems, and you're around masters all the time. So this is a good side of being a musician, a professional high-level musician, that helps you learn anything, not only languages. So I think this is the number one thing. It's like we are used to practicing 8 hours a day. It's nothing. I wouldn't say nothing. It's hard, but it's learning a language is a game compared to practicing an instrument at the highest level, because most people think the higher the level, the more fun you have, right? Normally, that's kind of the reason we all get into it. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to become good at playing an instrument so I can have fun and I can really enjoy myself. And the more you learn, the better you are. The more you realize, wow, I will never be satisfied with myself, because the higher my level, the less I think of myself, because this is the only way you can improve. That's a huge dilemma here. But then when you take that mentality and that habit into anything else, I'm sorry, I get into a lot of theory. You asked me a simple question, but learning a language to me is on a human scale, is something all humans can do, because we all do for at least one language, our mother language, and for a lot of people in most countries in the world, it's 2 languages, because there are people who have at least one dialect, and sometimes 2 dialects because of both parents, or even on one parent's side, and a lot of children learn that. So they can learn 2 or 3 languages from the start without being specially gifted. It started for me when people started saying, wow, you have no accent when you speak, and I had a very, very limited vocabulary. But when I was controlling the conversation and only talking about topics I knew the words for, I could really make people believe that I could have been Chinese, or at least most people on the phone, they would not imagine that I wasn't Chinese. So
How far into studying did you start to hear those compliments? Like how many years into?
Oh, maybe a few months into.
Wow.
But originally it starts. But for Asian countries, most Asian countries are not immigrating countries, right? So if you have a white skin or black skin or whatever, if you're not from there, if they see from your skin that you're not from there, they judge. Like in France or in the US, you would say, oh, you're racist because you judge, you assume where I'm from my skin color or my race, right? But in Asian countries, those are non-immigrating countries like China, Japan, Korea. Like it's going to be the same, right? So people say, oh, as for a foreigner, or in Lao Wai, or in Japan, they say gaijin, or they will give you compliments very easily, and it will very often be a very awkward conversation where you're trying to ask something very precise and they don't answer because they're like, wow, how long have you been studying Chinese? Wow, you speak so well. How did you study? Do you have a Chinese girlfriend? Can you use chopsticks? And all those questions that follow, and you're like, yeah, I was just asking you, where can I find that store? And so that's kind of part of the everyday conversations. We get a lot of compliments. It's always nice to get compliments when you're trying very hard to learn something. And so I think gift has a very good effect. It helps a lot at the beginning, because when you get compliments, it gives you fuel. You want to learn more because you feel that it's worth it. Yeah. And I totally can understand a lot of people who tried for, 6 months, 1 year, very hard, and they think it's very hard, because I always say that if you do 8-10 hours a day seriously for 5 years, there's no way you don't read and talk fluently properly. There's no way.
So for those like 8 to 10 hours grinding, what kind of stuff would you do? Because would it be like flashcards, or would it be reading books, media, or like shadowing? Yeah,
I started with those kind of self-taught methods with a cassette. Back in the day, it was still those cassette tapes, and I think the first one I used was 40 lessons, 10 new characters per lesson. Then I bought another one from mainland China in 4 volumes. That was from the 1980s. It was interesting. It had a nice political side to it that was fun, because there were a few of those sentences from political slogans that only existed in the 1980s, but it was fun. It was standard Mandarin, and also with cassette tapes and the standard Mandarin pronunciation from Beijing. So after those books, I started really to read novels and work with I only for learning new characters. I only read books and worked with a dictionary. Of course, that was after learning with the two methods. Then there were a lot of characters that even most Chinese don't recognize, because when you read, even, we read Balzac or French, Flaubert or whatever, French literature, there are also a lot of words that I've seen before and that I'm not sure of their meaning, or a lot of them I've never seen. But when you're a child, you read your mother language without checking every single word you don't know or you're not sure of, right? So when you learn a foreign language, you're like, oh, but I don't know that word, how can I read through? You feel compelled to know what you're learning before you learn, and that's the biggest mistake most people make, is that you should always learn before you understand. You should always accept that there are things that will pass through. This is the very exact reason why we learn quicker in the country, right? Because the more 糊涂, as we say in Chinese, the more lost you are when you learn a language, the bigger progress you make, because you're forced to be in contact with tons of vocabulary and things you hear and see that you don't understand. And this is the only way you improve. And most people who learn a foreign language will make the mistake of, they accept, that's the modern way of teaching languages, always to comfort people's psychological whatever. And I think it's the biggest mistake that we can do, depending on what you need. If you need to be comforted and think you're doing well and feel good about your learning state, of course do that. But if all you want is learn fast, you should never seek for that psychological comfort. You should feel bad and horrible and miserable learning all the time. This is the only way you improve really fast. So I always tell people, what do you want? And most people, they want both. And I say, well, it does not work like that. And the problem with learning languages is most believe it's because of gift. They do not accept that, just like learning an instrument at a very high level, or learning a sport is at a very high level, you need a coach. And the coach does not have to be with you all day long, but you need somebody to guide you. And that guidance, you can, with a language, it's easier to seek guidance through everybody, because you just have to be with a native speaker, and you can always, every single native speaker can be your teacher, which is not the case with high-level sport or high-level instrument. You only can be around a very limited number of people of that level, but you have to learn from them. Somehow, most people who learn a foreign language do not believe the people who are better than them, who have done it, can tell them what they need in order to learn well. Because most people think it came through gift. So it worked for you, but it's because you're gifted. But now me, I have to find my way. And I see them making mistakes that I've done before, because I've tried all methods. I wouldn't say all, but I've tried so many ways of learning. And there are some ways I've seen people use them for years. I tried myself and it won't work. It's like, in Chinese was a 背单词, like all the kids in Asia, a lot, they learn English by memorizing tons of simple single words without context, without a sentence. And it's the biggest waste of time you can imagine learning a language. But I can tell that to most of these people for years, and they still stick to it. And 10 years later, I know some people like that. 10 years later, like, oh yeah, well, after all those years, I have to acknowledge that I was not as gifted as you. I said, no, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you never listened to me, and you still don't listen to me, so you never achieved anything. And it's not because it's me. It could be anybody who did it. It should be the number one rule when you learn a language. Listen to the people who have made it.
I guess, like you mentioned, if they just go and memorize specific words each day, just as an example, you're not necessarily learning over time, right? It's more so you're kind of stagnating, almost getting like 1% in the wrong direction every day. So over time, you actually don't get the results that you're looking for, versus what you were talking about before within context. One thing I did want to highlight before is that you mentioned having that state of kind of uncomfortability, and how that really helps you learn a language, and how putting yourself in the foreign country itself will really help you learn, because you really get more words within context, more context in general, right? And native speakers everywhere. So at what point during your journey did you end up going to China?
It was actually at the beginning. Not the very beginning. I'd say the the second year, I learned Chinese, I think, for a year and a half, and I went to China. And I spent 8 to 9 months there, and then came back to France for a year and a half, and then I went back to China. So that, yeah, I spent from around the November 20th in 1999 until August around the 15th or 20th, also in 2000. And then in 2002 I was back in China, and I never left. I actually learned most of it's in France that I spent the most time learning Chinese. A lot of people said, oh yeah, but you were in China, it was easy. No, I'm just saying it's easier when you're in China, obviously, and it's easier when you're in a country, but I'm just highlighting the reason why. And the reason why you learn faster in the country is because you have no idea what most of what you hear and see means, and this is why. And the more you understand, the bigger proportion of you understand of what you hear, the slower you learn. And so this is the only thing I want to highlight, is that we always should learn before we understand, and most people want to understand before they accept to memorize something or learn something. So you should never ask why before learning it. And you know, it's like ganbei, yeah, let's do a ganbei, but don't ask me why, how do you write a ganzi and how many different writings throughout history, why does it have a simplified version? Why is this those two characters to get? No, a linguist will do that work, but you don't need to. You just need to know that, at that moment everybody says ganbei. You don't even need to know what gan means and what bei means, but eventually you will, right? But learn to say it first, and most people don't accept that.
Yeah.
So yeah, originally the first 5 years of my learning, I think I spent the most time learning. Purely learning the language when I was in France. So it's just creating an environment for me, and to get back to what you originally asked, different ways of learning included, for example, I had to accept that, as I was saying, when you read a book, there are many words in a dictionary, but there are many words that you would want to check the dictionary for, but you cannot do it for every word, otherwise you can't read. You don't have the time. You will spend months to read one book if you do that. So you have to. A friend of mine actually told me that it was a Chinese girl who had very, very good French and also learned after 18. And she told me, just check the words that you encountered in a short period of time at least 3 times. And sometimes it would be 4, but I kept that rule for a long time. I think it's a very, very good basis. And still you'll find that you check the dictionary a lot, and I see so many people who tell me, my memory is horrible. I checked that word 50 times in the dictionary and still can't remember what it is. I said, yes, me too. But I kept going. Mm-hmm. And the more you encounter that word, the more you will. That's also the thing. The reason why we do that, because when you have encountered that word in context at least 3 times in a short period of time, you start getting a feeling for what it means.
I guess another benefit of just being in the country, besides hearing these words in context and learning them, is earlier you said the kind of compliments that you would get. Nowadays, especially on YouTube, people film themselves getting those compliments, and then those typically go viral. What are your thoughts on that? And do you have any stories of shocking natives? I'm sure you do.
Yeah, I mean, I also had an interview with Xiaoma, who does that a lot, and a lot of, and it's interesting. It's always fun. I know people who have a lot of fun, and I actually myself enjoy some of those videos. It's always fun to see. And it's not that I'm impressed by any of that, because I've done that myself. I watch these kind of videos for another reason, because it's entertaining when it's done well. A lot of those videos, if they go viral, then they have, millions of at least once you get to several hundred thousands of followers on YouTube, then you can have your team, you can have editors, you can have people who prepare, you can have good editing, you can actually spend money on the post-production and everything. And the more views you have, the more you can actually hire more people and then do an even better job at post-production, and the videos become more and more enjoyable. I'm on the principle, it's the way it works, right? So for me, it's first of all what I see, because I'm a media person and we also do post-production. Even I don't do the editing myself, but I totally understand how it works, and I also have done it in the past. So I'm gonna notice how it's made first of all, because that's my job. It's been my job for 20 years. So I enjoy those types of videos for different reasons. But I always like a very genuine interaction. And in spite of all the editing, there's always some genuine interaction that you will notice when you have these type of videos. I mean, I'm okay with I don't think I do have or should have any opinion on these type of videos. It's a social media era. And as soon as I also enjoy a type of video that maybe if you're really seeking to, if you're actually just thinking of spending your time efficiently and learn a language, you shouldn't watch these kind of videos. It won't help you at all. It can give you some inspiration. Right. If you're seeking entertainment, it's great. If your only goal is to learn, it's basically not what you should spend your hours doing.
What about your personal stories of personally shocking?
Yeah, I'm interested to see when the cameras are off, what the Julien shocking natives looks like.
Thinking of what comes to the top of my head, restaurant owner here in France, the Chinese owner. He had this ginseng. You know how Chinese like to make alcohol at different seasons with different. Well, even at the same season, they have all kinds of. I don't know how you call it. How do you call it in English? Goqi. It looks like raisins, like dry raisins, but it's red, and it's used in Chinese medicine. It's used in Chinese. Chinese,
I know what you're talking
if you do
about.
Chicken broth or they use that a lot, and also in alcohol sometimes they use some baijiu as a base, and they put a lot of things. Some put even a snake or or scorpions, or I've seen all versions, and sometimes with fruits, sometimes with the Chinese medicine. So anyway, this owner had one alcohol that he made himself with ginseng in there. And there were a few different things, and I actually recognize, in spite of all the ingredients and medicine that was in there, I said, "Oh, your base, I think it's Luzhou Laojiao. It resembles Luzhou Laojiao because it has a special flavor to it." And he was amazed. Like, "How did you know?" I said, "Well, I used to go everywhere in China, and I really was drinking every type of baijiu, and my master knew baijiu very well, and some people I know also know baijiu very well. So I've been to countless baijiu dinners, and also tasting different types of baijius and everything. I don't pretend to recognize every single one, but often I will recognize that. And I can recognize Chinese people from many provinces. I hear them speak, and one or two sentences I can tell you what province they're from. This is the type of things I do well, and it happens every week. I can tell you that if I meet some new Chinese people every week, I will play that game with people, and I'm not always right, but then I will go, okay, if I'm wrong, I say, okay, give me a second chance or third chance, but I will tell you a region,
Yeah, I'm glad we get some insights in your off the camera shocking people on the weekly. Not even like not a once in a while thing. Every time you meet someone, a Chinese person, they are getting shocked. Doesn't matter if it's culinary knowledge, alcohol, or just where they're from. You will have them covered.
Yeah. Well, I like to shock them with a deeper understanding of things, because the stories of shocking them by perfect Chinese, having no accent and speaking so fluid and knowing more, recognizing characters that Chinese people can't read. I mean, that stuff I was doing that 15 years ago already, but right. I wasn't able to do what I was just telling you about the recognizing
Tell them their birth town, you were born here, weren't you?
Yeah, but for example, in 2005, I was able to recognize some regions because I was already going to so many places. Starting 2004, when I really moved to Beijing, I was doing TV shows in all provinces everywhere. So I already could recognize some accents. Some, for example, like the Shandong, especially the Jinan accent, or the Shanxi accent. I was going to Shanxi a lot. So some of those I could recognize, and I can tell you exactly. I can also imitate some of the different accents from different provinces speaking speaking Mandarin, and I can tell you what sounds they have a problem with, or the differences. The other day, it was the first time I was talking about the different accents, and there are a lot of people from Wenzhou in Europe, for example, from the Zhejiang province of Wenzhou, and so I know many of them, and I used to live in Shanghai, so I know the Shanghai accent. I can do the Shanghai accent in Mandarin anytime. It's very easy for me. And so we started talking about the Wenzhou accent and Shanghai accent, and they are very close. I mean, on the scale of China, those two places are close. But they have a recognizable accent. Like most Wenzhou people, they speak, and I say, "Oh, you're from Wenzhou." I can tell, and within 2 sentences, most of the time I can tell. And I started, because I've never really imitated that, but I started to try and to spot the difference. I wanted to analyze, to tell the exact difference in their accent, and I was able to actually tell exactly the main difference between the accent, because some parts of their accent speaking Mandarin are very similar. But so it's the kind of games that I play, and I can tell you exactly how. Anyway.
It's interesting. There's like kind of levels to shocking here. Like this current level, like the base level you see on YouTube, that was you like easy like 10-15 years ago. You didn't have to think about that. Then on top of that, then you can go even further. You can go even further than that, and just with like you mentioned, just perfect Chinese, no accent, and then you go beyond that into the deeper conversation. Shoot, even just closing your eyes and just being able to stalk them off of just hearing like 2 sentences. You're like, you'll say, "Oh yeah, I know you're from here." They're like,
I know your address.
I know your social security number. I heard it in your Chinese dialect.
In Shanghai, they have they use a big range of their voice. A lot of them. So, for example, they will use the false voice a lot sometimes when they speak in Mandarin. So like. You know, they speak a lot like that with very short sounds, but they will use 哦，你是不是在上海待了很长时间的呀？ And they will have they will use that voice, you know, a lot. But some, for example, Wenzhou, they are more flat, but it's also short sounds, and then they will, and some sounds also don't lie. They have, in Chinese, we talk about 前鼻音, 后鼻音. For example, when you say 分, and then you have 风. So if you write that in pinyin, it's F-E-N, that's 分, and F-E-N-G is 风. So one of the reasons why the Beijing accent is always the most accurate accent is because and a lot of people from the south and also from Taiwan do not agree with that. The Mandarin, the way it's the 普通话 was the way it is supposed to be told, at least in mainland China. It was set in 1955. And the definition of it is easily, you can find it, 普通话的定义. If you look for that on any website, you will find it, how it was defined back then. And it was based on the Beijing language and the northern dialects. So the pronunciation was based on the Beijing pronunciation, and the language itself was based on the northern dialects. The pronunciation in Beijing is the most accurate. For example, in that particular area, nearly all the 前鼻音, nearly all the sounds that should be at the front are at the back. So they nearly have no difference, and most of the time they have no difference between 分 and 风, 亲 and 清. It's all 清 风.
How to go and pinpoint people's locations with just hearing them. You love to hear it. No, that's pretty amazing, and thank you for your insight. That's pretty cool to know. Now we can go and train in the ways of finding people's social security
and
numbers
addresses.
off of hearing their voice and addresses. Now is the time. The most important question of them all. And I know this is something that you've been preparing all the time since you were a professional musician at the highest level, into then going and learning Chinese, going to China, and now finally coming all the way back here full circle. I know this is a message that you've been preparing for the KoreKara squad. So I'm going to go and put you on the spot in native Chinese to go and hear this KoreKara message. Let's hear it, Julien.
那所以用中文说的话，用中文讲，其实对我来讲，学外语的最重要的点就是我刚才一直用英语表达的一个原则，就是先学后懂。第二个就是天赋不是主要的，因为所有人类都可以把一门语言甚至2门语言学好。你没有做到每天7-8个小时坚持5年，你就没有资格说自己没有天赋。你坚持了再说，只要坚持，不可能没有结果。
Hey guys, thanks for making it to the end of the podcast. Comment down below if this shocked you.
And shout out to the patrons who are consistently shocking us with Cedric, Faraz, Kevin, Alan, Darren, Drew, Jack, Joey, K90, Meredith, MKSXN, Suzu, Yui, Sad Boy, and Sad Boy.